Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about AI navigation. In doing this, we're going to use this, I can't remember his name, but this T-Post guy here. We grabbed him off the Mixamo site. Um, we're going to be using him as our character to navigate around this plane we got in the background. We're just going to throw this idle pose back in here and set this as layer default. Gonna make a transition to walk and transition back. We're gonna add a float called speed. And if speed, we want the exit time not to have an exit time. If speed is greater than 0.5, we want him to walk. No exit time on the way back. And if it is less than 0.5, we want him to stay idle. So the next thing we need to set up is our actual nav locations. So create an empty, zero out this transform over here, reset. This can be nav points. Create an empty under that, 0.1. And if you want, instead of doing this, we can right click and add a cube or a sphere just so you can see the nav point itself. Move that out here and we'll just turn the mesh renderer off and the sphere collider. We shouldn't need those. But for now, we'll leave the mesh renderer on so you can see where the nav point is. We'll name this 0.1. Duplicate that. Move it to a different location. Name it 0.2. And we'll have a 0.3 as well. Next, we want to create a new script called anything you want to call it, but naming conventions are pretty good to go by. So we'll call it AI navigation. Normally I put this like an enemy movement script. Let it load a little bit. There we go. And I'm going to drag this onto the character and edit the script. The script's going to hold our game objects for our transforms. And then we're going to try to index through them and change which point he's going after. So to start with, we want a public game object array called nav points. And we'll need public up here. We need to put using, I don't know what that was about. There we go. Using Unity Engine .ai. Nav mesh agent. Nav mesh agent. This allows the nav mesh, or that allows the character to navigate the nav mesh itself. So we'll grab that nav mesh agent on start so we don't have to put that in there. Equals get component nav mesh agent. Next, we can call a set destination. So nav mesh agent dot set destination, and it's looking for a vector 3 target. which we should be able to pass in a nav point. Nav point 0 dot transform dot position. So now it's telling it on start, go to nav point 0, which would be nav point 1. Over here we need to input our nav point, so we'll lock this inspector. I'll grab all 3 of these and we'll drag them in. So now that that's good, we'll see if nope, we're missing a step, hold on. It says no nav mesh agent attached. So nav mesh agent. And then this can be set to defaults for the most part. It's a little big, but it'll work. The height, about 1.65, 1.75, and the radius, I normally do about 0.25. That encompasses him and lets him go into certain areas that aren't too narrow or too wide. The next step we need is to grab this plane and set it as static. And this will set navigation static. You can set it as navigation static itself if you'd like. I just do static, it's easier. Now we go to AI navigation. We go to bake and set the agent radius to the radius that we just did. Set the radius height 1.75 and we hit bake. We'll notice that everything just turned blue, which is good. That means navigation is now baked on this plane. Now if you go in, it should set that destination and you should see him move to the first point. Yep. And he moved to the first point. So the next step is on update. We want to check to see how close he is to that nav point. If vector 3.distance from the transform dot position and your nav point at index 0 dot transform dot position is less than your nav mesh agent dot stopping distance, then we want it to basically increment your nav index. So we'll set the nav point or the set destination to nav points 1 dot transform dot position. And let's see if this works, and if this works we could go one step further. Before we do that, we want to see if the stopping distance is set to like 1.25. See if that works. And we can't see. Okay, so we did go to the next one, but we didn't see it. So we'll bring the camera here, go to main camera, hit Control Shift F, and it switches the camera out to wherever you're looking. And then see how this looks. Goes there, hits that one, and then goes to the next one. If you want them to actually stop, we can change his stopping distance back to 0 to see if he goes all the way. I just didn't want him to miss it. See if that changes anything. Yeah, so without a stopping distance, he doesn't actually 0.25. Without a stopping distance, he doesn't actually transition into the next one. Which is fine, because we can put a small stopping distance in here. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create a public game object called current nav point, and we're going to set this nav point on start. Current nav point is equal to nav point 0, and then we're going to set destination current nav point dot transform dot position, and then down here when we do a public void next nav point, we're going to increment it, and we're going to set the current nav point to the next index. So how can we do that? Let's think. I think what we're going to do here is do a public int for nav index, and down here we're going to do nav index plus plus, which increments it by 1, and then do if nav index is greater or equal to nav point dot length. We're going to reset it to 0, and then we're going to set current nav point equals nav point with the nav index. Nope, nav index. And then we're going to call set destination. No, if we call it right, nav mesh agent dot set destination current nav point dot transform dot position, and then now when we get to here we should be calling the current nav point dot transform dot position, and over here we should be incrementing the next nav point. So on next nav point, nav index gets incremented. If the nav index is greater or equal to nav points dot length, we're going to set it to 0 so it doesn't overflow. And then we set it to current nav point is nav points at the nav index, and then we set the nav destination to current nav point transform dot position. This should work, and it should be cycling through the nav index or the nav points now. There he goes. next piece of this would be adding an animator, public animator, and then set an animator on start. And then do an animator dot set float, and that is equal, or setting speed equal to nav mesh agent dot velocity. What is it saying? Dot normalized question mark dot x. We'll see if that works. Nope. So his speed is being set here, but it's not what we want. Alright, let's jump back into this real quick. So I was looking at the other script I've written, and it is velocity normalized dot magnitude. Let's see if that works. There he goes. The sassy walk. And then one more thing that we can add to this to make it more dynamic is instead of him going to next nav point, we could do a public void random nav point. And then what we could do is nav index equals random dot range between 0 and, it says this is going to be an int, which max is exclusive, min is inclusive, exclusive means it's not counting that number. So we got 3 nav points, so we want 0 to 2, I think. 0, 1, 2. That's 3. But it's not going to count 2, so 3, I believe. It's not going to count the third one. So 0, 1, 2, 3 is cut out. That should be working just fine. Now, we do the same thing here. We do if nav index is greater than or equal to nav points dot length. You reset the nav index as just to ensure that it doesn't go over. And then we could copy these two, current nav point, and then let's do the next nav point, random nav point. Let's see if that's working. Hopefully it doesn't throw any errors. goes to the other one. So there is going to be an error, I believe. And what if he goes to the same one that he's already on, which had me error out before, but it may not the way that it's running the code now. So it looks fine. Before I was working off triggers and colliders, and if you're in a collider and it gives you the same number, he would already be in that collider, which would cause him to try to double back, but he wouldn't re-enter the collider. So I had to make a check. Excuse me. So I had to make a check for that collider again, which then made me basically do a check for if I was already on that number, and then if I'm on that number, go to a different number. But he looks like he's working just fine. And that's about all I got for you guys today. I appreciate you watching. If you like my content, please comment, like, and subscribe. I got a Patreon. I got a itch.io. I got my YouTube, obviously. That's what this is on. Yeah, so if you like content, please do those things, and I'll be doing some more content here frequently. Thank you. Bye.